Shalini, my question to you therefore is, again, the hypothesis is that the person is, she's a moderate risk taker. She's doesn't have a specific goal in mind, but have the underlying debts changed for her to shift out of credit risk funds or no? Part one. And if so, and either direction, either conversation, what are the kind of funds that she should choose? So if you recommend that a person can continue in credit risk funds, are there some high quality credit risk funds that you prefer that people should keep in mind?
So definitely, I mean, for someone who is, looking at moderating their risk or a moderate risk profile, and I'm guessing that we are still talking about the debt space. In which case, what happens then is that we're talking about taking a measured level of risk. I think here's where the expense ratios of some of the funds do come into play, because like if you talk about a credit risk fund, let's say, not going by the past 1 year return, but if I'm looking at potential yield going forward, and if I would just take any sample good rated credit risk fund, like say an HDFC credit risk or a Kotak credit risk fund, the yield to maturities today are in the range of around 8.5, 8.2, that kind of yield. Now, if I were to understand the post expense, because the yield is an indicative potential return, and the expense would obviously, eat out the yield to some extent. The regular plan expense ratios are pretty high. They're in the range of 1.3 to 1.5%. That kind of eats up into the credit risk yield. And therefore, the thought is that if I was at 8.5 and 1.5 is going away in an expense ratio, and I'm left with 7% expected yield, then I would not be, why should I take that kind of risk? That's not what I would suggest. I would probably ask them to go to a medium term fund or a short term fund, which probably has a yield to maturity of 7.5 or 8%, but then correspondingly also has a lower expense ratio of anywhere between, let's say if you're talking about a medium term fund, and here's where some of the other work around regular plans and direct plans would come into the picture for an investor, which we can delve upon later. But we are also talking about, let's say you talk about a medium term fund which has a yield of around 8 or so. And if you're talking about expense ratio, if I talk about the direct plan expense ratio, and if it's somewhere in the range of 0.7 or so, then you're talking about a very good yield. So you're taking the yield into your portfolio without necessarily taking a credit risk. So you're taking a medium term kind of bond fund, but you're not taking the credit risk, which, like Arun mentioned, could be something that could be like volatility, could be so many other things introduced into a moderate risk profile person's portfolio. So you could shift out to a medium term fund, or even little lower than that risk could be a short term fund, where again the same logic holds, that the yield to maturities are somewhere in the range around 7.5 or so. But then on a direct plan also, if you see, you have expense ratios which are as low as 0.2 or 0.3. So that actually is improving your yield without taking any kind of credit risk, which could be like
And all houses have a decent enough category in this option, or are there one or two which do a better job, Shalini?
Well, I think many of the leading names do have good, short-term funds, of course. So the kind of choice there is a little bit more. Some of the better, the older known names like HDFC has a good medium-term fund. Obviously there would be some reading needed by the investor to understand, what they are going into if they are not going to go to credit risk because of the risk. Or if they are in credit risk but they want to move out.